Let me get your latest sense here of the timetable and what you're listening for, indeed listening to here as you try to figure out when this might happen.
Well, thanks for having me, David. Two things. One is on the timetable. It's a little strange to say in mid-April, but the congressional calendar for the rest of 2017 is packed, and that's one reason that led us to the conclusion that we've been led to by the president's willingness to want to bring back the Affordable Care Act reform as the first thing on the agenda. Now, there's a lot of reasons, and good ones, why they should do that. Not just that the system is straining and needs some reform, and also that they get tax savings out of the fiscal 2017 budget process from it that they can then apply to the fiscal 2018 process for tax reform. But if you look at the congressional calendar, very simply, we've got fiscal 2017 half-year spending coming up when they return next week and possibly the week after. Mm-hmm. Then you've got to get Affordable Care Act reform onto the floor of the House and the Senate and get those resolved between the two, any differences resolved, get that to the president. That's going to take the rest of May and into June at the quickest, and it may slop into July also. Now we're looking at the fall, mm-hmm. and in September, October, what you've got is you've got the full year spending bills for fiscal 2018. You've got a likely debt ceiling crisis that needs to be resolved, either increasing the debt ceiling or suspending it again, as was done a couple of years ago. Now we're into November, December, and so that's realistically the earliest target that's going to happen. You combine that with what the president said last week about not releasing any White House preferences on tax reform before the ACA was resolved, and you get an end-of-the-year result at the best.
Terry, when you're talking to clients, how much does the president's willingness to do this matter? You mentioned that a moment ago. Are investors happy enough to know that this is something that he is still prioritizing, even if it doesn't happen here until the end of the year or early next?
Well, I think the investors appreciate the White House's resolve on this. I'll say that. At the same time, they're certainly disappointed in the time frame, that things are slipping farther and farther back. They understand why. That's a complicated little dance that I just described, but they understand why. But markets work themselves up into a fairly irrational position that tax reform was going to happen in the first 100 days, which was never going to be the case. The fastest it was ever going to happen would be August as part of the fiscal 2018 budget process, and now that appears to be off, so realistically it slips till the end of the year.
When you got something like tax reform that takes so long to put together and takes so long to play out, does that inherently complicate things more, that the more time you have, the more people who can put their hands in and try to change things? Is it in a way easier to push something through more quickly?
In a way, yes, it is, and that's a very smart question. If you get resolve and you get policymakers grouping around one or two options and then pushing forward, then things happen. That's certainly the way it happened 30 years ago in 1986. That's the way major legislation happens, in my experience. But if you get a situation where tax reform is no longer the next couple of months priority that it appeared that it might be, and then we're moving into something later in the year, then what you have is you have irresolution among the policymakers, and you also have policymakers revising their own ideas. It makes it harder to actually come together around something and push forward.
We've talked to you before about one of the big sticking points. That's the border-adjusted tax. How about retroactivity? How big a sticking point is that going to be? Getting something through that's going to go affect folks earlier in the year?
I think Republicans have not said much about retroactivity. We have always been of the view, and I underscore that this is very much our view, that retroactivity to January 1st, 2017 has always been on the cards, and I think it remains on the cards. House Ways and Means Chairman Brady actually said that publicly last month. It's the first time any policymaker had said it. Mm-hmm. But the politics and the policy are pretty irresistible in our view. If you want to make the biggest economic and political bang for the buck possible, then you make it retroactive to January 1st, 2017. You don't make it prospective. And that is clearly what both the president and congressional Republicans want to do, I think.